Hey everybody, welcome back, or if you're new, welcome. My name is Mel from MelDidItHerself, and today we are doing a makeover of our kitchen cabinets. They are oak, they are old, they are dated, and they just really needed some tender loving care. So we gave it to them. So we bought this house in August of last year, and we knew from the get-go that we wanted to do something to make it a little bit more modernized in the kitchen. It's not a huge kitchen, but it's very much kind of like the center of the main floor. It's kind of open concept, and it's the first thing you see really when you walk in the front door and turn. So we wanted to make an impact, and right now we're in quarantine. It's a weird time, not gonna lie, but it's the perfect time to get any sort of projects like this done and accomplished because we have all the time in the world. And luckily we were able to get all the supplies that we needed, and we had lots of stuff on hand, so that made it much easier to get this accomplished. Things have tightened up a little bit in terms of getting things from hardware stores and stuff now. So if you're looking to do this project and you can't get the supplies right now, just save this video for later and come back to it, revisit it in a month, 3 months, next year, whenever life is back to normal, or some sort of normal, I guess. Anyways, so this house was from 1998. Yes, if you were wondering, I was 5 years old then. So that just gives you an idea of how old and how dated these cabinets were. So I'm gonna go through everything that we did, all the supplies that we used. At the end, I'm gonna have a price breakdown and a bit of like in looking back, what I wish we had done differently or what we could have like improved on and that kind of stuff. But I hope you enjoy. I know you're gonna enjoy. So before we get into it, why don't you just hit that subscribe button right now? Come on, go do it. Okay, did you do it? Okay, let's go. Okay, so here's what we're working with for the before shots. So you can see just pretty plain, basic cabinets. There's a little bit of a kind of like a toddler's breakfast bar there. We will be changing out the counters at one point, but for now we're just working on the cabinets. So starting off, just gonna give everything a really good clean. There's about 20 or so years worth of gunk on these, like give or take, because I did wash them. I'm not disgusting like when we moved in, but you'd be surprised what you will find in the nooks and crannies and on that hardware too. So just using a natural disinfectant and getting them all nice and clean. So for the project itself, this is the supplies that I'll be utilizing, and I have a breakdown of the costs at the end of this, but you can take a little screenshot if you wanted to do this yourself. So for the color, it's Behr, and it's called Inked. Got it from Home Depot, and this is a little swatcheroo of it to make sure it was going to look halfway decent, because I didn't want to commit to it and then find out that we were screwed. So starting out, we're going to do taping of all the sides of the walls that we don't want paint to get on. So I use Froggy tape because I find it adheres a lot better than like your average painter's tape, and it gives like a really crisp line so you don't get any bleeding. So it costs like a few more dollars, but I find that it really is worth the difference in cost. And just make sure you consider all the spaces that you're going to be painting or not painting. You'll see on the underside of the cabinets here, it's white. That's going to remain white because if it was darker, I think that it would kind of darken up the whole room itself. So we're going to stick to the color scheme that they had from the get-go. So here's a fun little trick that I picked up somewhere, and is probably not necessary, but it gives me a warm fuzzy feeling inside, so maybe it will do that for you too. So I'm going through and writing T1, T1, T2, T2, T3, and continuing on up till T14, and what that stands for is top 1, top 2, top 3 for each cupboard, moving from the left side to the right side of the room. So we have 14 cabinets on the top row. So I'm just cutting that up, and I'm going to be putting one of the numbers on the bag with the hardware that corresponds with it, and then the other one, so the other T1 or whatever, is going to go on the cabinet itself, so that I know when I'm putting it back on after everything's all painted and looking beautiful, I know which hardware is going to go with it. All the hardware is pretty much the same, but there were a couple screws that were like different lengths and widths and stuff, so I actually found it to be really useful. So you can see here I'm just putting it up right there, and I'm just putting that there until I get the hinges off and all of the screws. Okay, now it's time to take off the hinges and all the hardware. So I'm putting everything into a bag with that corresponding sticker, like I had said, making sure I get the middle pieces off too, because these will be way easier to paint once they are off, and I won't have to worry about like getting anything on the whites and stuff. So right here I've taken all the screws out. Everything's good. Look at me explaining it and getting all the screws, putting them in a bag. It's incredibly self-explanatory, but you're gonna have to watch it anyways. Wow, exciting, and I bet you can guess where I'm gonna put that. Yep, one's there, and then guess where the other one goes? It goes right there. Have you gotten it yet? Do you get it? Is it rocket science? I don't know why I'm going over this so much. Okay, and so I took this opportunity to take everything out of my cupboards and wipe them down thoroughly. That means the backs, that means the sides, that means where all the stuff sits, and giving it a good reorganization. It took a lot longer to do the whole process while doing this, obviously, but I definitely am happy I did it, because after I was done the project, I didn't feel like going back to redo it and to clean, so I would do that. So now I'm going through and putting a coat of primer everywhere that isn't the like real wood. Like, I don't know, I'm not a professional, I don't know what this stuff is called, but it's not real wood, I can tell you that. Some sort of like cover, I'm not even trying to guess what it is. I would say laminate, but I know that's the wrong word. Anyways, we're going to cover it so that the paint has something to adhere to, because with the cabinet doors, they are wood, so we can just sand those down and make them bare wood. But with this, I don't want it to chip. Like, I don't want the blue that we put over it to chip easily, so putting a coat of primer, and I actually ended up doing 2 coats of primer on some of the spots that were really showing the color through. I don't know if that's necessary, but I found it to be neat. It also took a little bit longer, but honestly with this whole project, I didn't mind taking the time, because A, we have the time, and B, it's like a kitchen. It gets a lot of wear and tear. It's a very focal point in our house, so I wanted it to be done well, and I wanted it to be done right. So sometimes it's worth just taking that little extra time. I'll also take this time to note that we did all of the top row and like the sides all at once, and then got them done and up, and then did the bottom. And I did a lot of footage on doing the first part of it, but not the second, so that's why it looks like that. So this is what the cabinets look like when we have sanded them with an Orbital sander. You can see the corners aren't quite done because it wouldn't reach in there. So then I just went through and did the sides and the back and the little corners there with a little bit of elbow grease and some sandpaper. Probably using about 120 grit sandpaper, kind of like a medium grit, if you will, because we didn't want any like lines to be on the cabinets, but wanted to make sure that we got that finish off so that the paint would adhere well. So you can see, compared to the cabinets before, how much barer they are, which is great because that allowed the paint to really sink in. If you don't have an orbital sander and you're doing it by hand, you can do it to this extent, which is what we did on the back. That's hand sanded, and that's fine. You just want to rough it up so there's something to adhere to. But if you have an orbital sander, you might as well use it. So this is me putting primer onto one because I wanted to do one whole cabinet thoroughly and see what the color was going to look like. After I did it, I did not like the look of the color with the primer under it. So since the cupboards were so stripped, we just opted to not do primer on the rest of them. I don't know how to describe the difference in the color and the finish, but it just reminded us of like a young boy's bedroom, the color. It was like a little bit more blue and less navy, and just like the sheen on it that it gave, I don't know. Anyways, we didn't like it, we didn't do it. So far so good in terms of them holding up and not chipping. So if you want to go our route, that's cool. Probably professionals would recommend primer, but maybe we just didn't choose the right primer. I don't know. It was for cabinets, so it probably is, but somebody will probably correct me. So anyways, you can see kind of the color that it's giving, and in this light, that's like the color that we wanted. So this isn't really a good example to show you what it actually looked like, but believe me when I say it just wasn't Gucci. However, for some of these side pieces that obviously required the primer for it to adhere, I just put an extra coat in some spots where the light was really shining on it and it was kind of like making it look a little bit lighter. I just put a third coat of paint on it and it did the trick. So we could have probably done that with the cupboard doors, but that would have required way more paint. So I'm so glad that we made that decision when we did, and we didn't end up having to like redo them or anything. It definitely helped us out in the long run to kind of be a bit impatient and want to see one of them ahead of time completely finished. For any of the places that I kind of over painted outside the lines, I was able to wipe most of it with just a damp paper towel. Some of it not so much when I was kind of over near the cabinets, but on the walls certainly, especially because this is a semi-gloss finish. There's a bit of a sheen, so it made it pretty easy to just wipe that away. Okay guys, and this is it, the final reveal. So as a reminder, here's a before and after. Another shot, the before and the after. Finally, the before, and then the after. So for those that are interested in taking on a project of this nature, I wanted to put a bit of a breakdown in terms of things that were needed to complete the project, and then a realistic breakdown of costs. So for us, we had a good amount of supplies already on hand. I have a bit of like DIY / painting storage. So we have an Orbital sander and the pads. We already had a paintbrush, all-purpose cleaner, and paper towel, which is to wipe down the cupboard, so you can really use whatever. Using a microfiber cloth is probably way better for the environment anyways for a project that big. And we already had a screwdriver to take off and put back on the hardware. So the only real costs that we had were the primer, and I only used about half of the container that we got, which was the smallest amount that we could get anyways. Paint times 2, I think it was 800 milliliters of paint. You can see it in the picture that I posted at the beginning. We actually just ran out and needed a little bit more. Luckily, the way we found out about the color that we chose was because we have an accent wall in our powder room with this exact same color. So I had a little bit of paint left over for that, and that's what we used for the back side of the bottom row cabinet doors, and it worked just as fine. The only difference was that it was a matte finish versus a semi-gloss. So I definitely made sure that the fronts of all the cabinet doors use the semi-gloss because it gets a little bit more wear and tear, but we didn't care as much what the back of the cabinet doors looked like. So just keep that in mind. I would maybe have grabbed even just like a sample size of that same color more, and also just to do touch-ups. We do have a little bit of the paint left like on the edges of the empty containers, and it won't go bad because they're closed, so that I can use that for touch-ups. But I would have liked to not have to like be stingy in the end, so that cost would maybe go up a little bit if I were to redo it again. And then I also bought a new roller set, which I only used 1 out of the 2 that it came with, and I can reuse. Froggy tape, same thing, big roll, only used a bit. And then a paint can opener I splurged on because I didn't have one, and I was always using random pieces of metal that I could find to open my paint cans. So in total, this came to $84.14 for us. Now, initially, we did order some different knobs, and I'm going to show the photo of the knobs that we ordered, and I don't think we're going to go with them, so I actually rewrote this list without the knobs to show you if you were able to repurpose the knobs that you currently have, knobs or pulls on the cabinets and the drawers. It could cost you this little or less if you didn't need to get a new roller set or tape or whatever. But just to give you an idea of the cost of knobs, so I had gotten square ones for just the cabinet doors and then octagon ones for the drawers. So in lieu of that, which was an extra $60 worth, I ordered them on Amazon. So they were pretty affordable for how many we needed, because we needed 21 for the cabinet doors and then 4 for the drawers. So that brought the total cost to $151, which is still very affordable for a big reno of that nature, or upcycle, facelift, whatever you want to call it. Let's talk lastly about not mistakes that were made, but small lessons learned throughout the way. So as I've said, I wish I had bought just a little bit more paint, probably just a sample size of it on top of that would have been okay for what I was trying to accomplish, but realistically having an extra can would be good to have, because then I could keep it on hand if ever we needed to do more touch-ups in the future, and it would stay fresh and be good. So I'd probably buy an extra thing of paint. I probably should have grinded through this whole project quicker. It took in total probably close to 2 weeks, maybe a week and a half, but I was only working on it maybe like a couple hours a day on and off. I'm working from home, so I was doing it on breaks and things like that. But near the end of it, I just really wanted it to all be over with. So I kind of wish I'd pushed through it and got through it a little bit quicker, because I would have enjoyed the process a little bit more probably. I wish I held my paintbrush properly, and this is not something that I knew until I researched it after. I was holding a paintbrush like this, And by the end of it, I had shooting pains in my left hand. Both my parents have arthritis, and now I'm concerned I might have made it for myself. This is how you're supposed to hold a paintbrush, the internet tells me. You have more control, and then you don't have like a flippy floppy wrist. You're just like, you know, it's more of a this motion than a this motion with like something pushing back on you. So don't make the same mistake I did. Protect your little wrists. They do a lot for you, and you notice it a lot when they hurt a lot. Learn the hard way. Okay. So, I wish I searched longer for knobs. I wanted to get the project done, so I just ordered some off of Amazon that in theory looked good and on photos looked good, but we weren't super happy with them. It'd be nice if I could search in person. We're in quarantine, so I can't, and things aren't open. So whatever. I knew that if we didn't like them and we weren't going to use them, that I could use them for future projects for upcycled furniture and things like that. So it's not the end of the world, but if I were to redo this again, I would take a little bit more time to look for the knobs. So instead, right now, I'm on the lookout for, I know which spray paint I want, but you can't get it online anywhere. But I'm just going to spray paint the existing knobs that we have because they're silver right now. I do want them to be kind of brassy gold. And I found what looks like the perfect spray paint, but Mama can't get it right now, but she will. This is like a whatever one, standing in between the two coats of paint. There's a couple spots where I can see a little bit of texture that I definitely could have sanded out, and it would be a little bit more smooth, but I only kind of notice it if the sun kind of hits it in the right way, so it's not a big deal. But if you have the time and you aren't completely over the project like I was, take the time, get a really high grit sandpaper, like 200 or more, and just kind of like just a light little dusting over it, and it'll smooth everything out, but won't take away the paint in the primer that you've already put down. Probably should have finished the job completely because I kind of cheated, also because I ran out of paint, but not that I was initially planning on doing these things anyways. I didn't pull the stove out and do the sides on either side of it, and I didn't pull the fridge out and do the side that it's beside, because you can hardly see it, but I will do it eventually because if and when we resell our house, that'd be pretty greasy to just leave it undone. So I will do it, but not for a while until I feel like doing stuff on that kitchen again, because I'm pretty over it for right now. And then I also wish I did some more research on primer, because my understanding of primer and how it acts wasn't good enough, because I dusted some of my equipment. So I'm sure I can get this to be completely cleaned with like a metal brush or something, but primer sticks, dude, and I didn't know. So I had a paintbrush that started out like this, and by the end of my journey, looks like this, because the primer was just so hard and it got so clumped up in here. This is like way cleaner than it was, but just for you to see, don't use your good brushes with primer, because this is as good as I could get it, and quite honestly, this is pretty good for it compared to what it was, but like, it doesn't come out. Just get them from Dollarama, save yourself the money, the hassle, and just use shitty brushes for primer. Not ones that are going to shed, but Dollarama ones are good enough. So these are the knobs we got on Amazon, and although I do like the color and they came kind of as I thought they would, they just show off how not perfectly lined up the cabinet doors are. So we're not in love with them. Just the straight lines are not forgiving at all. And then also the handles, look, see how they kind of stick out a little bit too much? They're just not our forever handles, and that's okay. We're going to find new ones or upcycle. Well, did you love it? I told you would. Okay, thanks for tuning in, guys. If you take on a project of this nature yourself, post it, tag me. I love seeing it. It makes me so happy when people like message me saying I inspired them to do a project or a DIY or anything like that. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. And if you were to take on something of this size, because of my recommendation, it would be like such an honor. Okay, if you didn't subscribe at the beginning because you thought I was lying about the video, First of all, how dare you? Second of all, you owe me a subscribe now. Thank you so much. Stay tuned for my next video, and we'll see you next time. Bye!